Welcome to the Communication Access Connect. I'm Darlene Hansen, and we're here with sponsored through the Disability Voices United. As you guys know, and share with your friends, please, and if you aren't watching on a recording, know that we meet once a month on the third Tuesday of the month, 4 o'clock, right here. And so you can get the link by registering through the DVU website. And we welcome anyone and everyone who wants to talk about having access to communication. I told you who I was. I want to tell you a little bit. First of all, we have Ed and then Kira. Ed's in the background. Kira is in the background, and she's the person that's going to do the technical stuff. We want to make sure that everybody goes to their screen, goes to the little world sign, and chooses the language that you want to hear in. You have to choose a language, okay? So please do that. Lorna, you want to explain that to our Spanish-speaking participants? Thanks. I want to give the rest of our communication rights department here a shout out. So Tim, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm the Assistant Director of Communication Rights. William, are you ready?
All right, the baton has been passed. Go for it, William.
My name is William Del Rosario, and I am a student intern. I am Hispanic Filipino male with black hair, brown eyes, and my pronouns are him. I have autism, apraxia, am a multimodal communicator, and use AAC. Supporting me today is my mom, Michelle. Thank you for making the time to be here today.
Great. And Nina.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Nina Spiegelman, and pronoun she, her. As usual, wearing something black. And my weather is like really good, and I'm really sorry for you all. I'm the policy director for Disability Voices United, and this is absolutely the most fun thing we do, I think, even though we do a lot of other great stuff. This is really great, and I'm so happy you all can be here today, and really looking forward to hearing our wonderful speaker.
Thank you, Nina. And I forgot to do my visual. So I'm Darlene Hansen. I have shoulder length, blondish gray hair, and I'm wearing a sleeveless piece of clothing that's, some say olive, some say gray, and I have glasses. Okay. I want to introduce today, we have with us, and she popped on last month, so that was really cool. And we want to carry on this conversation of from Disability Rights California. We have Megan Lazet. Do I say that right, Lazet?
Yep, that's right.
Great. And Megan has worked with us for a few years now on communication access and communication rights and that. And so we invited her back to share maybe some updates or just keep our brain flowing here with some great information. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Megan.
All right. Hi, everybody. As Darlene said, I'm Megan Lazet. I'm a supervising attorney with Disability Rights California, and I work with our team that does mostly intake and outreach. So if you call to ask for help, you'll talk to someone on my team, or if you need a training like this one, you'll work with someone from my team. I'm a white woman in an orange shirt trying to will fall to come on this 107-degree day, hiding out in my bedroom from my 4-year-old. So I am gonna drop some links in the chat here real quick before we get started. So feel free to ignore them for now and I'll explain what they are in a minute. I'm just gonna do this so I can get the PowerPoint launched and not be doing too many things at once because multitasking is not my strength. So just bear with me for a moment. All right, can everybody see the PowerPoint okay? Somebody could just unmute and tell me that they can.
Yes.
All right, great. So today I'm here to give just a sort of brief, very high level overview of your rights related to accessing communication supports from different sources. And the things I'm going to say today are not going to answer all the questions, right? I'll try to answer any questions people raise. But as I'm talking, you may find yourself thinking, wow, you could spend a whole 3 days on this. And you would be right, because we did. So last year, we did a 3-part series of trainings, 3 2-hour sessions that covered all of this in much greater depth. So if anybody finds that they want to go back and get the long version, DVU has a link on the website, but this is where that link goes, is this YouTube document. So oh, there we go. I didn't mean to click on the link. Sorry about that. But now you know what it looks like. Okay, are folks still seeing the
Yes. Oh, wait, now we're
the PowerPoint? Are you seeing the PowerPoint?
There you are now.
Sorry about that. As I bumble through Megan's adventures with technology. And then there's also a link here to the publications page of Disability Rights California's website. Has publications that go into more depth about all of these topics. And then if you have an individual question that's more about your specific situation and not the kind of question you want to ask in a big group setting that isn't confidential, you can either call our 800 number that's there on the screen, or if you have your question kind of ready to go today, feel free to fill out our electronic sign-up sheet and we'll call you. So the first link I dropped in the chat is a link to that sign-up sheet. So you can just give us a real quick what the issue is about so we can have the right person call you back to talk more about that issue. Or if you don't have an issue now, file away our phone number for future use and feel free to call us if something comes up. So I just want to talk a little bit about what DRC does before we get into the substance here. So Disability Rights California is California's protection and advocacy agency. And that means that we are the agency that is mandated to advocate on behalf of people with disabilities. And we, in that work, we deal with a whole variety of disability related legal issues, and our scope is ever growing. There have been, changes probably since I last came and spoke with you all. But certainly among the things that we work on are the things we're going to talk about tonight. Services from the regional center, services from the Department of Rehabilitation, Medi-Cal and healthcare issues, disability discrimination in a variety of settings, including employment, accessing businesses, college, lots of different settings. So again, as we're talking tonight, if you think of a question that you feel like the answer would be helpful to the whole group, definitely feel free to jump in and ask it. I'm fine with questions as we go along or at the end. I don't have a strong preference personally. So, and then if it's something you would have to share a lot of details about your life to explain the question, that's a good sign that it might be a better topic for an intake. Or if this discussion makes you think of something that's kind of off topic, but still good to talk about, that's another great use for our sign-up sheet. So without further ado, we're going to talk a little bit about the different agencies that sometimes have to provide you communication supports. and a brief overview of what it is they're supposed to provide. And you'll sense a theme, right? With every one of them, there is some kind of way to fight back if you disagree with the decision they've made or with something that they're doing wrong. So first, we're going to talk briefly, very briefly, about school. And so we're going to talk tonight primarily about students who already have an IEP or already getting special education services. If you have questions for a student who has a 504 plan or who maybe hasn't started this process and doesn't have either yet, that would be a great topic for us to do an intake about to talk in more detail. But assuming a student already has an IEP and they have communication support needs, there are a couple of things the school district must do. So one that's really important is they must assess in all areas related to a student's suspected disability or disabilities. And the reason that's important when it comes to communication supports is that you may very well need a really thorough assessment to help show what it is you need, what device, what service, what support from staff at school in order to communicate effectively. And the school district has to provide instruction, of course, right? School's always about instruction, but they also have to provide related services. So that's services that a special education student needs to benefit from their education, from the instruction part. And that can be a whole variety of things depending on a person's individual needs. But for our purposes, it's important to know that it could include things like AAC devices, things like, an app that goes on a device that maybe you already have. It can include supports like ASL interpreters. It can include training to learn how to communicate more effectively. It can include things like speech therapy and other things that may affect your more directly communication related services, right? So they can provide things like physical therapy, occupational therapy that you may need in order to communicate as effectively as possible and really be a part of school. And benefiting from school isn't just about being able to answer math problems, right? Thank goodness. It's also about participating socially and making friends and participating in substantive discussions in class. So, if the school is trying to really narrowly define what you need to communicate, then, there's room to push back and say, hey, I think I need a little more than that to really be a part of things. So in the school realm, there are a couple different tools you can use to push back if you disagree with what the school district is doing or what they're telling you they can do. So the main one is due process, which is like an appeal, right? It's a hearing process that you can use if there's a disagreement about what the school is going to put in your IEP. So this is not for situations where it's already in the IEP. That's a separate problem. But where, for example, you say, I need this particular communication device, or I need this many hours of training to learn how to use my communication device, and the school district says no. So you have a right to appeal or go to a hearing. And if you have more questions about due process, it's a topic we could spend the whole night on. Feel free to reach out to DRC. We can talk in more detail, but we also have publications that talk about it a lot. And then another tool that you have is a compliance complaint. So this is for kind of the opposite problem. So when the school district has already put the right thing in the IEP, but they're not doing it. They're not implementing it. They're not implementing it correctly. Or if they're violating some other special education law, like you asked for an IEP meeting and they didn't hold it within 30 days, you asked for an assessment and they have, delayed beyond the timelines that are in the law because they can't just sit on it, right? They have to do things within a certain amount of time. You can file a compliance complaint, which is just a written complaint to the California Department of Education. And then a third tool that it can be helpful sometimes in resolving disputes is an independent educational evaluation, or an IEE. So when the school district does an assessment and you get it back and it's garbage, right? You read it over and you disagree with their conclusions, and it's bad enough that you look at the assessment and say, okay, if the IEP team uses this to decide what I need, they're going to make the wrong decision. In that situation, you have a right to ask the school district to fund an IEE, which is an assessment the district pays for, but that will be completed by a person who's not a school district employee. And part of the power of an IEE is that you get to have some say in who's going to do it. So this is an opportunity to try to choose someone you think is going to do a good job. The school district needs to sign off on who it's going to be. So it's, it's not a decision you can make completely on your own, but it gives you some of that power back that that can feel, it can feel you can feel very powerless when the school district has their own employees do assessments and they do bad assessment after bad assessment. So this is a tool for breaking through that problem. And so if you get an IEE and it comes back and has the results you were hoping for, it supports what you want to ask for. Sometimes that will lead the IEP team to change their mind and say yes to what you're asking for. But even if it doesn't, you at least now have useful evidence if you have to go to due process to prove what you need. So I'm going to pause there because I would not be surprised if there are questions. And I can't actually see the chat right now. So if there are any that anybody wants to read off to me, I'm happy to answer them.
I can pop on here for you, Megan.
Thanks,
One second.
Darlene.
So Hadash was saying that as an educational advocate, I find it extremely difficult to get parents sufficient training and support so devices are used across all settings.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. It's really heartbreaking to fight the good fight, right? And get sometimes a very expensive device, and then it gets really underused. So that can definitely be a challenge. And I think sometimes the answer involves piecing together services from more than one agency, which of course we all wish it was easier than that, right? But yeah, certainly helping a student learn to use the device in different settings, in different contexts is super important. Because after all, the whole point of school is to prepare you for life in general, right? So, sometimes, if you have a family that's having that struggle, we'd be happy to talk with them and kind of talk through what the solution might look like in their situation. But yeah, that's a major frustration in a realm where there is no shortage of major frustrations.
So I think too that we have to remember, at least that's how I compartmentalize things in my head, that the schools, they're thinking we're only responsible for school goals and school needs. And then the regional center is thinking we're only responsible for after school. And sometimes when a device or a system is kind of fostered and given in the school setting, then nobody picks up the ball for the home, right? And
Yeah.
so, but technically, if we compartmentalize that way, it would be a regional center support if you need that support. But also vendors have, like we learned last month, vendors will support you if it's a vendored piece of equipment, like a Dynavox or Prinky Romic or something like that. You can get support that way. I know it's hard because then you're having to orchestrate it, but there's just, there are options.
Yeah.
Available.
Well, and when school districts say we're not responsible for anything that happens outside of school, that
Right.
is a vast oversimplification,
Yes.
right? They're responsible for helping you meet your IEP goals.
Right.
And especially for a transition age youth, those IEP goals should have a lot to do with the real world, which includes places outside of school. So I think sometimes you can get creative in crafting IEP goals that will rope them into, thinking a little more broadly about what their responsibility is. And sometimes we can connect, what needs to happen at home to what the student needs at school, right? Like, is the student needing the device to do their homework?
Exactly.
Well, unless teacher's going to come home with you, then maybe mom should know how to help the student use the device, right? In order to do their homework, for example. So
that's good.
I think it all depends on the person's individual situation, but sometimes we can get creative in crafting those arguments.
And then here, I'll give you another real quick one here. If the IEP team says that they don't agree with the IEE, the independent evaluation, and don't want to implement what it stipulates, can we submit a compliance complaint?
So the IEE, if the IEE says, for example, student needs X device and X number of hours of training to use that device, and that's what you were hoping for, right? That's what you were hoping for the IEP team to give you. It's still an IEP team decision what to put in the IEP, and the tool for combating that is due process, which is no easy task. And I know this is not an easy solution, right? To say, well, you could take that IEE and go to due process. But, you know, at least it gives you some evidence that you didn't have to go pay out of pocket to develop that can be really useful at a due process hearing, especially since the district funded the assessment, right? They signed off
Right.
on this assessor as being qualified, right? So it makes them look kind of bad. If it's a really well done IEE that seems very well reasoned and it's very clear about what you should have, and they're still saying no, right? And sometimes when your evidence is really strong and you file for due process, the district is more inclined to come to the table and negotiate with you and maybe settle it without having to go all the way to hearing, which saves you some of the grief of due process, but not all of it.
Yeah. Tim, you had a comment or question?
Sure.
This is the first time I heard about IEE. Thank you, Megan, for bringing this up.
Sure,
When the
never too late,
student has
Tim.
an IEE, do you think that their report is more in depth because they are using the school district specialists?
I think, you know, IEEs, like anything else, vary a lot, right? They're still done by human beings who, vary a lot. And one thing, you know, school districts try to work every process to their advantage. So one thing to keep an eye out for if you're asking for an IEE is that a lot of school districts like to give you their pre-approved list of assessors who they'll fund.
Yeah.
And it's not bad for them to give you that list, but just approach it with a little bit of caution and make sure you talk to those people before you choose one and, you know, realize like, okay, so if they put these people on their list, they probably have a pretty chummy relationship with them, right? They may like the answers they've gotten from them in the past, or they like the price. And it's okay to go outside of that list, right? It may be an easy starting point. And if you find somebody on the list who you think is good, there's nothing wrong with that. But just keep in mind, if you are not confident in any of the people on their list, it's okay to find someone else and say, well, this person charges the same amount, right? Or, you know, charges the going rate anyway, and is better qualified. And here's why, and see if they'll agree to fund that. So I think, you know, very often people, you know, feel like they get better results from an IE than from the district's own assessment. But we also see cases where people go get an IEE hoping it's going to be the answer, and then they get it back and they're disappointed in what the IEE says, right? Which might mean the real answer is not what you were hoping it was, or it might mean your person who did the IEE didn't do a great job either, right? which is really disappointing. So putting in the work to select the right person up front is very worthwhile.
Okay, one more question. It's kind of twofold, I think, but people are asking about private schools or independent school. What does the district's obligation in terms of that? And then also I think we can add in there, what's the obligation of these private schools to meet the students' needs?
Yeah, so that's a big question. And if I'm going to give the short answer, and if you still have questions for pertaining to your particular situation, I would say feel free to fill out that intake form and we'll get back to you to talk in more detail. But so if you're placed at a non-public school by your school district.
Real quick, Megan, I'll have you slow down just a tad for the intro.
Sure, sorry about that.
Go.
All right, so first of all, if your school district through the IEP places you at a non-public school, that's really different from just making a choice as a family to go to a private school. So if you're at a non-public school, your school district still has all the same obligations to you that they would have if you were in the regular public school. And how they meet that might partly be through contracting with the non-public school and some things they may provide directly, but their obligations are no different. So for students who are just choosing to go to a private school, school districts still have a duty we call child find, which is the duty to locate, identify students who might have a disability and assess them, right? But they don't have to provide special education services to people who are still choosing to go to private school. Sometimes some districts do, but it's hard to make them. What they should be doing is making sure that you know that you have the option, if you need it, to come back to the public school system in order to access services through the IEP. So, and private schools, we'll get to this. This kind of lines up with the next slide, or maybe the one after.
okay.
But
Perfect.
private schools, in a lot of cases, have to at least provide reasonable accommodations to students with disabilities. So while they may not need to, a little itty bitty private school may not be obligated to, provide a very expensive communication device, they might need to work with you to accommodate your communication needs within reason. So they may not have to do as much as a public school would, but it doesn't mean they don't have to do anything. So.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk briefly about Department of Rehabilitation. Let's see, you say you survived the school ordeal and now you're ready for adult life. Department of Rehabilitation is an agency, a state agency that provides services to help people with disabilities prepare for and obtain employment. So when you're a client of DOR, DOR can pay for assessments when it's necessary. And then the most important thing in this context that they provide is rehabilitation technology. So that can be things like a communication device and lots of other things that you need because of a disability. And then they can also provide services. So that could include training. It could include things like ASL interpreters, right? Services from a person to help you communicate. DOR is really on the hook to pay for things when you need it, either to achieve your employment goal. So you have the plan you have with the Department of Rehabilitation is a little bit like your IEP with school in the sense that it's driven by goals. So you have a goal for what you want to be when you grow up, and they provide services to help you achieve that. So if you need the service or support to achieve the employment goal or to access other DOR services that will help you achieve the employment goal. So for example, if you need a communication device to be able to participate in your college classes for this college program that DOR is sending you to in order to become whatever it is you want to become, right? That requires a college degree. And so just like in other systems, you have appeal rights if you disagree with what DOR says they're willing and able to do. Appeals in DOR land are a little more loosey-goosey and informal than in special ed and regional center. And I won't get into too much detail, but you have basically 3 options when you want to appeal. The first option is an administrative review. We call it an AR for short, which is pretty informal and pretty quick. And a lot of things get resolved at that level. You can also ask for a mediation or for a hearing. And this process actually has changed a little bit recently. So we have a publication about DOR's appeal process, but if you go look for it on our website right now, you'll see it's not there because we're updating it to reflect the changes. But the main thing to keep in mind now, if you don't already have a dispute with DOR, is if they say no, I have options. I have rights. I don't have to just accept that decision.
Is there an age requirement for DOR, Megan?
So there actually isn't. There's this like rumor floating around that you have to be 18, which isn't really true. Transition age youth often participate in a DOR program that is specifically for students. So that really is more oriented towards career exploration when you're not sure what you want to do yet. Like how a lot of us feel when we're, new adults or approaching adulthood. But then, if you're say 17 and you want to go ahead and apply for full DOR eligibility for actual rehabilitation services, you can do that. They're not going to duplicate what school should be doing for you, which is the reason that a lot of people wait, because they're getting what they need from school for now, and then at some point DOR will become more important in their life. DOR and the regional center and the school district are all supposed to really work together with transition age youth, and they don't always do that. So, you can invite DOR to your IEP meeting, for example, and figure out how the 3 agency services are going to kind of weave together to give you a smooth transition process. So if you experience that not happening, that would be a good time to reach out to Disability Rights California and see if we can help you with that problem. Are there any other DOR questions
No,
before I
that's
move on?
good. Keep going.
Okay, great. All right. So some other sources of communication supports. And again, this is the very short version, just to kind of get you started and give you an overview. So often health insurance, including Medi-Cal, can pay for communication supports. You're usually going to pay when it's medically necessary. And the definition of medically necessary is a little bit different in different situations. So if you have Medi-Cal, there is a slightly different definition of medical necessity for kids than for adults. So if you look at those links I dropped in the chat, after the one to sign up for an intake, there are links to our fact sheets that DVU and DRC developed together that talk about accessing communication supports from different sources. So there's one about Medi-Cal, and that includes information about the medical necessity standard if you're dying of curiosity. And so with Medi-Cal, again, you want to keep in mind if they say no, that doesn't have to be the end of it. You do have a right to fight back. So, and this is true usually in the case of private insurance too. So in almost any insurance plan, you should be able to file a grievance. And then with Medi-Cal, you also have a right to file an appeal. And then with most managed care plans, Medi-Cal or otherwise in California, you have a right to ask for something called an independent medical review, or IMR, when your plan has said that something's not medically necessary. And the fantastic thing about IMRs is they're so expensive for the plan that sometimes they'd rather just give in and give you what you want than pay for the IMR itself to get to the answer of whether they have to give you what you want. So it can be a useful tool.
And what does IMR stand for again?
Independent medical review. So that basically Department of Managed Healthcare that makes the plan pay for a doctor who is outside of the plan to review the decision and determine whether what you asked for is actually necessary.
All right.
All right.
Here's one question. Is Medi-Cal more limiting in their definition of medically necessary?
Yeah, so the medical necessity standard can be tricky to meet, particularly for adults. The kids' definition is a little broader. But I would say don't be too discouraged by that. I've heard this sort of blown out of proportion, and then people are afraid to even ask Medi-Cal. You know, I encourage you, if you're needing to approach Medi-Cal, to ask them to pay for a communication device, for example, to review our publication and you know, so you know what the standard is that you would have to meet. And it, you know, I haven't dealt directly with this issue in a long time, but I, you know, in the past, and this was years ago, had a client who, you know, basically had a trial period with the device, and then Medi-Cal wanted them, you know, to go before this 3-person panel. I don't know who these experts were they drummed up, and demonstrate that they knew how to basically ask for really basic needs, right? Things like food, let you know that you're in pain. But it's a little unfair because it's a fake situation, right? Like, you're not actually demonstrating the person knows how to ask in the real situation. You're asking them to act it out. So, and for some clients, that's confusing. So, you know, if anyone encounters that kind of situation, keep in mind that you have appeal rights. Make sure you appeal within the timeline, and definitely feel free to reach out to DRC so we can kind of advise you further about how to fight that.
And in my experience is, I mean, when you say medical necessity and then you say communication, well, communicating is a medical necessity. So it's,
yeah.
I mean, unless, you know, there's some bizarre recommendation being made, I mean, I haven't ever had it challenged. It's actually been.
Well, that's good. That's
easy.
good. It's possible that things have improved somewhat since I last encountered the situation, but the children's standard is really actually pretty easy to meet relatively, right? Anything that helps to ameliorate the effects of a disability, right? Helps to make it better. And this is it's all written in very ableist language that I apologize for, and these are not my words, but you know, if it helps you do something that your disability makes it hard for you to do, then it's medically necessary, right? That's a relatively easy standard, a little more tricky for adults, but still not impossible. So. All right, and then I put regional center last amongst these, agencies that we go to pay for things because they are the payer of last resort. I'm sure those of you who are regional center clients or who know someone who's a regional center client have heard that saying before. So the regional center's job is to provide services and supports basically to allow you to participate in life, right? The things everybody else wants to do in life. They provide things you need because of your disability, and they provide things that there's not someone else to pay for, right? So if it should be Medi-Cal paying for it, if it should be school district paying for it, usually it's not going to be the regional center paying. But the caveat to that is they're not supposed to just throw up their hands and say, oh, go ask school and good luck, right? They're supposed to help you actually access things from what they call generic resources, other sources that might be able to pay, and then coordinate to make sure there aren't any gaps. All of us who've dealt with regional centers know that's not how it often plays out, but it's very powerful when you're talking to them about these things to say, oh, you think I can get it from Medi-Cal? Help me do that, right? Because then once they get involved and actually try to help you do it, it becomes a lot harder for them to say, oh, well, because they can see what the barriers are because they're more directly involved in dealing with those barriers and sharing in your frustration of trying to access things from other sources. So just like in other settings, you have a right to fight back if you don't like what regional center is doing. So if you ask for something to go in your IPP and regional center says no, you have a right to appeal. They should be sending you a written notice of action, and you have a right to appeal within 30 days of the date you receive it. And then if you have the other problem, right, the service is in the IPP, but they're just not doing it. They're saying we can't find a vendor, or, oh, we forgot, or whatever their excuse is, right? You can file a 4731 complaint. And just like a compliance complaint in special ed, a 4731 complaint can also be used to allege other violations of the law, right? I asked for an IPP meeting and they didn't hold it within 30 days, for example. Those kind of procedural things. So.
All right, there's one question here, and then there's an announcement. So I'll do the question first. Susan was saying, I pay for my son's AAC therapist out of my pocket. I asked Regional Center to help. They don't pay for AAC, is what she's been told.
So that would be a good example of a time to, if they've never given you a notice of action, to ask for a notice of action, because I doubt they will put that sentence in writing in a notice of action, because it's not going to make them look good, right? So it would be one thing if they were saying, oh, there's somewhere else you should be able to get that and let us help you access it, right? But there should be very few in regional center land. There should be very few blanket statements of we don't do X, right? Because regional center, outside of some very specific things that they're not allowed to pay for, there's not much they can't pay for if you need it because of your disability and you can't get it somewhere else. So that's a definite red flag if they're saying, oh, we just don't do that, right? What that really translates to a lot of the time is I have a service coordinator who's kind of green who's never heard of this, right? Which is not the same as we can't do this. So, and sometimes if you like to resolve things at a lower level, sometimes you can pull in the, a supervisor and just say, oh, can we get someone, involved who might be able to help us sort this out, right? Without throwing the service coordinator under the bus, but get somebody a little higher up who knows that actually we have done that before. And sometimes we figure out how to do it, just isn't one of the 10 things you do all day, every day, right? And so maybe the service coordinator just hasn't heard of it. But.
So what's your recommendation if regional center is refusing or failing to provide the notice of action?
Yeah. So if you want to go nuclear, you can file an appeal anyway. So you don't have to have a notice of action in hand. If they're saying no, you can go ahead and file the appeal. If you're wanting to resolve it in kind of the least adversarial way, you can try escalating it, right? You can try going to a supervisor and saying, are we really going to stand by this? No, I think there might be a misunderstanding here, right? Would you like a do-over? But sometimes in that, back and forth trying to sort it out, they just delay endlessly. And that's where going ahead and filing an appeal, and maybe it'll get settled and we don't have to actually go to a hearing, can move things along and get their attention if they're kind of, dragging you around and delaying things. So The other thing that I think is really important in regional center services is to ask for everything at an IPP meeting. It feels slower at first because you have to put in the request and wait for it to be scheduled within 30 days, but it's usually faster in the long run because it's the only way to hold them to any kind of timeline for doing things. I'm sure a lot of you have had the experience of calling regional center, and the service coordinator is nice about whatever you're calling about. It seems promising, right? They say, oh yeah, let me look into that and get back to you. And then they don't get back to you, and you call them again and they say, oh, I'm so sorry, it's been a busy month. And before you know it, it's been 6 months and you still don't even have a yes or no. So you're not even to the point where you can appeal because you don't even have a no, right? So ask for an IPP meeting, and then they have to hold it within 30 days, and they have to bring somebody to the meeting who can make a decision. And if it's a yes, it has to go in the IPP. If it's a no, they have to send you a notice of action within 5 days. And then you have a right to appeal. So at least there's a clear timeline to move things along. And if they really can just work it out without an IPP meeting because it's such a simple issue, you can always cancel the meeting, right? But make sure it's written in the IPP and that you've signed it before you kind of let your guard down with regional center.
Great. I think you probably know this, Megan, because I think the DRC was instrumental, but the Yvette here at the 440 mark is letting everybody know that all 21 regional centers now have deaf and hard of hearing, aka Deaf Plus specialists working with consumers who have one of the regional center criteria diagnoses, as well as some level of hearing loss.
Yay.
And each specialist covers a catchment area. And then if you look down here, we have, who was it? It was Rima, right? Yeah, Rima says she is the specialist, the Deaf Plus specialist for the Alta area up north. And she works in the Sacramento and other counties near Sacramento. So if you fall into that category and you need some support, there you go. Here's another, yeah.
Speaking of which, I think I saw that Christine from DRC joined the call. Hi, Christine. So Christine is on our intellectual and developmental disabilities practice group that works on regional center issues. So that is the team that, yes, that has done some really hard work lately in improving regional center services for people who are deaf, because it's historically not been very good. For sure.
I got you, Tim. And then we have Tim. Go for it, Tim.
I have a friend who has a child that has a disability. In their IAP, they asked for a communication device to build up confidence to assist them to speak. Their child is getting denied for the device because they can speak with their voice without any problems. The child just chooses to use some kind of device to be heard. The school district had denied them for a device. What recommendations would you offer to this family because the child is not being diagnosed to have a speech problem?
Okay. So it sounds like a situation where there might need to be an assessment. So if there's if there's not an assessment that describes what the situation is that's going on and recommends a particular approach, that leaves everybody just kind of like relying on their own personal opinion, right? Which is not where we want to be. So it sounds like they may need to either go back and ask the regional center to do an assessment, or if the school district, if they've already done one, but it was not a good assessment, it may be time to ask for an IEE. And you also give me an opportunity to put in another plug for our intake process. If that person wants to talk about their individual situation, that parent would be welcome to give us a call, and we'd be happy to talk with them and see if we can provide more specific advice to their situation.
And let's see, what was it Elizabeth was asking? Elizabeth has had some regional center coordinators say that they cannot make a decision at the meeting. It has to go to the manager or the panel. So you had mentioned that they need to bring people to make decisions to the meetings. How do we kind of negotiate that?
Yeah, so two things. So first is when you make your written request for the meeting, if you can briefly list what the things are that you want to talk about. You don't have to tell your whole story or make your whole case. That's what the meeting's for. But briefly say, I want to talk about respite, or I want to talk about, an AAC device, whatever the issues are, and flag for them that they're supposed to have a decision maker there, right? The way I usually write a request for an IPP meeting is, I'm requesting an IPP meeting. I look forward to meeting with you within 30 days. Hint, hint, I know my rights. Here are the things I want to talk about. Please ensure there is someone present at the meeting who can make a decision about these issues. Another hint, hint that I know my rights, right? That avoids a lot of problems. If worst case, you show up to the meeting and there's not a decision maker there, the law has allowed for that situation. It's happened before, and so it was anticipated. So the IEP team has to reconvene. I want to say it's within 15 days with the right decision maker there. So it's a little bit of a delay, but it at least still has a timeline attached to it, so it doesn't drag on forever. So they need to figure out, now that they know what you want to talk about, they need to figure out who needs to be there and get them there within 15 days. So
I did that, Megan, just to make it so people can actually see you.
Yeah, I think I have one more slide and I can.
Oh, do you have one more? Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, and then Jane was, okay, where to learn about regional center rights? I'm pretty sure DRC has a
great question. Let me pull up our special education or our regional center manual that is sort of everything you ever wanted to know and then some. And then we also have some smaller, less intimidating publications, but this is sort of the more comprehensive manual that's recently been updated. So hopefully that's helpful.
That manual is very comprehensive. I refer to it all the time.
But it's also, I'm making it sound scary. It's written in a question and answer format in pretty plain language. So,
very accessible.
It's not one of those things you sit down and read it like it's a novel. It's not like beach reading, but, it's a good reference material when you have a specific question. Usually you can find something related to your question. So. All right, let me pull up the PowerPoint again, and we can just look at the last slide. Oops. If I can get my computer to cooperate. All right, so we've talked about all the places that you think of, paying for the big stuff, but we can talk a little bit about reasonable accommodations. So, and again, this is the very short version, and I, refer you back to the YouTube recordings of the long version of this training for more details on all of these things. But there are a lot of different types of entities that might have to provide reasonable accommodations to people with disabilities. And in the context of communication, they have to provide auxiliary aids and services. And the goal of all of this is to provide equal access, right? And in the context of communication, to allow effective communication. So colleges, both public and private, have to provide reasonable accommodations to students. Employers have to provide accommodations to their employees who need an accommodation to do their job. Businesses that you frequent, right? Hotels, restaurants, stores, government agencies. So the post office, the library, government offices like the DMV that you might have to deal with from time to time, can and should provide reasonable accommodations. And if you ask for a reasonable accommodation and it's denied, or you ask for it, this comes up in the college context a lot, you ask for it and it's granted, but then they don't actually implement it correctly. Or you experience discrimination in some other way, you can file a discrimination complaint. And the agencies you file with and the timelines to file vary based on these different, based on who it is that you have this dispute with. But we have fact sheets for every one of these situations that talk about your options for filing complaints for lack of reasonable accommodations or effective communication. So.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Okay, we'll stop sharing. And now, for those of you who didn't get to ask any questions or have been waiting, jump in. I'll give you a chance. I got my burning issues, but let's see what everybody wants to say. The screen share is still loading for me. It'll maybe take a minute here. Hang on. Great. You guys have been great at asking questions in the meanwhile here. So a theme that I'm kind of noticing, Megan, is that, there is a process for everything. and you know,
And a frustrating one at that, right?
and that is the point. And so if it don't feel like you have to, you know, put yourself in any spot here, because we'll all read between the lines, but what can we do to make these processes less cumbersome? I mean, what can we as Communication Access Connect, as Disability Voices United, as a group of people who are frustrated, what's our move? I get that there's a
Yeah.
process that the process is part of the barrier, really.
Right. Right.
So what can we do? Any ideas?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think there are super easy answers to that, which is probably no
No, it'll take
surprise to
time.
any of you, right? But you know, I think navigating these things is this, like, you know, there's this patchwork quilt of working within the system and changing the system, right? So,
Right.
and I think, you know, in any individual situation, keeping clear in your mind which you're trying to do at the moment is really helpful in keeping from getting too overwhelmed, right? So, you know, when you're in the thick of trying to get something for yourself that you need now, sometimes working within the system is the best thing to do, right? But when it comes to, okay, now I have some breathing room and I can think about how to actually change the system, you know, some of the changes that I think we would all like to see would need to be changes in the law. So, you know, legislative advocacy can be a tool for that. And DRC does have a team that works on legislative advocacy, and they're always happy to hear ideas from the community about what changes in the law would make systems better. They're not always able to advocate for everything that people suggest because they're dealing with sort of political realities of what they think they can get done. But that's not a reason not to bring ideas to them. And, you know, often when I talk with someone and they say, I have an idea for a change in the law, when I get into the nitty gritty with them of what they're envisioning, it turns out a change in the law actually isn't a solution in that situation, right? It's the law actually already does what they want it to do, but the way it plays out in real life is not is not reflecting that, which is really frustrating, right? So, you know, a lot of what DRC does in our work with these individual agencies is, as we're, you know, working with individual clients on individual issues, we're also keeping an eye on patterns of incorrect behavior, right? With agencies we work closely with, like the regional centers and DOR. And in some of those settings, we have the ear of somebody higher up who can help address a systemic problem that we can all agree this never should have been happening, right? And we can fix that. And so I think, you know, if you all are able to do something similar, right, where there's some relationship building with leadership in agencies that are important to providing communication supports, and you know, develop an avenue to give feedback and share, you know, patterns of problems that you're seeing. I can give you an example of sort of an easily accessible opportunity to do that. So the Department of Rehabilitation, you know, we talked about appeal processes for your individual issue, but the public is also welcome to attend the Rehabilitation Council's quarterly meetings and give input. How often that translates into real change, I'm not sure, but it's an avenue for sharing kind of not so much an individual issue, but a bigger issue that you're seeing about how to improve DOR services, how to address patterns of, you know, problematic denials, that kind of thing. So, and, you know, with the regional center, sometimes there are similar opportunities to get involved in providing public comment, right? So I don't know if any of the folks on the call participate in self-determination through their regional center, but the regional centers each, when self-determination first got going, had to create an advisory committee, and that was an opportunity for some clients and parents to participate and give input on how that program was going to be implemented. So it's another example of kind of a way to influence things. Lisa, I can grab you the link in just a second here to the DOR Rehabilitation Council meetings. In fact, let me do that right now.
And then
People are
while you're
thinking of
doing that, Lourdes has a question. So Lourdes, we're gonna have you unmute. And
Thank you. So this has been really a great experience. I'm an independent facilitator. I have picked up a lot of terminology. I really appreciate it. But I'll be honest, I sometimes cannot understand my clients and I rely a lot on the parents. But the populations that I am working are usually like low income schools that students that graduated, they didn't properly use devices. There was not really a really good communication. My clients were monolinguals, devices were in English. You know, with all of those things, what I'm really coming across is like I need people to come in for regional center to understand that yes, family had used in paper the device for like school age children, but it is not an appropriate device. It might have not been like what family learned, and through COVID and all of those things it does not work. And we need real assessments.
right.
How do we how do you document that in a way that makes sense when I cannot even understand what my client is saying? So advocating, it's really like very difficult because I can't find words to say it.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that the types of assessments regional centers doing are not really getting to the heart of what the client needs given their family situation, right? In order to access communication. So, I mean, I think that's a conversation to have at the IPP meeting, including the client as much as possible, of course, but also including the voices of, family members who can explain what the challenges are, what the barriers are, and what it is you're asking for. And just making sure that whatever regional center agrees to doesn't get oversimplified when they write it into the IPP and miss the point, right? So you can say, okay, this is very nice what you've written, but this isn't really addressing my need. Can we phrase it like this before signing?
Another thing is that this month on August 31st, the SDP Connect is going to be all about communication and getting access to communication.
The two worlds collide.
Yeah. So join us, because hopefully, I mean, this is a big question for me as well. And so hopefully we can get some more answers that we can all agree on that are, appropriate for all, but most importantly, meeting the needs of the client themselves, right? Of the regional center client. So just on August 31st, that's just the SDP Connect. It's a regular SDP, but it's all about communication access. Okay. So that's a good thing. And then I had another thought while you were talking. Oh, real quick, I'm going to do
Arlene beat me to it. Please join us on the 31st.
Yeah, but you were going to say the other one too. Okay, yeah, join us on the 31st. And then Nina, can you tell us a little bit about tomorrow for DVU? Real quick with the, oh, I lost it, Judy. There's an event going on tomorrow. I got to find it now. I didn't write down all the words. Do you know what's going on tomorrow?
Tomorrow, right, at the time that we normally have our SDP Connect, what we're having is a special event just in that time slot, where the state, very recently, the state auditor released a report about regional centers and DDS's obligations for oversight and a lot of other interesting findings. And I think you'll find it really interesting. They are coming, folks from the state auditor's office coming to go over those findings in that report. And I think it could be of interest about all kinds of the communication, I mean, just anybody needing regional center services and having issues with that will find it really interesting. So great reminder, Darlene. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nina. Okay, so I'm going back to our comments here. Lourdes, is there anybody that I'm missing? Because I'm going way back now.
Can I ask a question in the meantime? As
go.
Yes.
I had taken advantage of Megan being here. There's something that you said that made my heart leap out of my chest from like hope and fear. And that's that issue of accessing generic resources, which we've all, encountered. And that notion that you said, which is absolutely the right, concept that seems to be in the law, that the regional centers aren't just supposed to throw out like, go get your denial from, go get this at Medi-Cal, get your denial, or,
Good luck to you, right?
They even
Yeah.
tell you to do Medi-Cal. They're just like, it's not us. You gotta, or even just maybe some names of agencies or something like that. But this notion that they are actually supposed to help you obtain the resource. And of course, what isn't spelled out anywhere is how much effort, what does that mean? And do you have any recommendations, or have you actually had sort of cases involving sort of pushing for that? I mean, how can we get more out of the regional center in the actual help to do that?
Yeah. So I think the first step, the very preliminary step, is making sure that there's a goal in the IPP that requires whatever the services that you're ultimately after, which can be a battle of its own, right? The regional center will say, well, we're not the ones who are going to pay for that. And you can say, okay, but shouldn't my goals reflect what I need in my life? And then we can talk about how to get there, whether that's a regional center service or something else. Because once that's in the IPP, you have a little more leverage to get them to do something, step up and do something. And then, I think each regional center formats their IPP documents a little differently, but most of them have a goal, and then underneath it, something about who's going to do what, right, to achieve that goal.
Right.
And they'd much rather it say, regional center will help me request this from Medi-Cal, right, or whatever, than to say that they're going to pay for it. So I think nudging them and saying, like, it's either or, there's no out here, right? Like, either you need to write that you're going to help me access this, or you're going to write that you're going to help me, you're going to pay for it, right? Like, we've all agreed already that I need it. And so you need to make sure I get it one way or the other. So getting it written into the IPP is helpful, certainly. And then if they don't do it, you can file a 4731 complaint. I think, just really assertively kind of taking that position of it's one thing or the other. If you're saying that regional center can't fund it, then tell me who can and help me navigate that. Like, you're welcome to talk. I'll sign a release. You can talk to my school district, right? You can talk to my social worker at Medi-Cal. Or, oh, you weren't able to get it from IHSS. Okay, then you need to pay for it, right? Like, just not letting them out of that loop, and keeping the pressure on.
Those are great suggestions.
But that doesn't mean it's easy, right?
No, but
acknowledge
it's
all
good.
These things are not easy.
It's good to have a way to kind of structure in your mind, like how to box them in as much as possible. Thank you.
Now, somebody was asking, R. Andrade was asking, had a point, that regional center denies the denies supporting skilled AAC, speech and language people, for her son's complex communication needs, and just wants him to go to any old speech and language person, totally disregarding the fact that he needs someone who understands his communication needs.
Yeah.
How do we negotiate that?
Right. So if the service is written into the IPP, but not in a specific enough way to obligate them to this very specific need, it isn't specific enough about the qualifications of the service provider, a first step would be to go back to the IPP process and ask them to clarify the language. If they say no, you can appeal and go to hearing about it, which is not easy, but at least gives you leverage gives you an opportunity to go prove that this is the very specific thing that we need. Or if it's, or if they agree to clarify the language, then when they send you any old person who is not qualified, you have grounds for a 4731 complaint.
Okay. Now, R. Andrade, did you still have something you needed to say? So can you raise your hand and then I can find you? You said, can I ask a question, please? So I don't know how to unmute you if I can't find you. Happy to have you ask a question. I'm gonna have, while we're working on that, Bernadette, you want to go? Bernadette I'm asking you to unmute, Bernadette.
Yes, I just wanted to make the comment that I've been in a similar scenario that was just given, and I actually had the therapists that were uncomfortable or didn't feel like they were qualified to provide the service that was in question, AAC focused intervention, to actually write that out. And then that was kind of, if you will, evidence for them to present to their service coordinators. These people are saying they don't know what needs to be done. And it just really kind of makes it a black and white situation there. And that's pretty hard to deny when the therapists that have been recommended say specifically, nope,
passing on the case.
we don't do this. We don't do that.
Yeah, it's great to hear that that happened, because I think the struggle that we sometimes have when, and we see this in other regional center services, right? If there's a regional center vendor and kind of in informal discussions, you get out of the vendor that, yeah, they agree with you that they're not the right provider, or they agree with you that you need more hours of whatever the service is, but they won't say it to the regional center because the regional center pays their bills and they are hesitant to sort of cross them, which is frustrating. But yeah, if you have a provider willing to say, no, I'm not the right person for the job, obviously that's really helpful.
Thanks, Bernadette. Okay, R. Andrade, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, this is Rochelle. Thank you so much. Yeah, my experience has been, to even, so my son's 16 and I'm at a stage where we've been through a lot. So I've learned a lot, but my service coordinators haven't. So so they want me to go, take 10 steps backwards, go through this list, find providers, find people that will deny you. And it takes months. And my purpose is to get my son to progress. So I don't want to lose 6 months or 7 months just to try to convince someone. I would like to bypass these steps because he's 16. And I would like to set up his IPP to reflect that, so that when somebody else is handling his IPP and not me, they know that these are his specific needs, so that he doesn't always have to prove that he needs these skilled people, like skilled OT, skilled PT, he has a very complex athetoid body, and he's a scanner, not a direct select. He's complex needs. We've gone through those pieces. I don't really want him to have to redo it every time his IPP comes around, or we're trying to find a new provider because the old provider can't, has stopped, or different reasons. So how would I set up the IPP to reflect these pieces that we won't have to keep repeating?
Yeah, so I think you want to get to a place where instead of the IPP containing very general language and then the regional center saying, well, here's the list of providers, pick the one you want. We're agreeable to whoever you want, because then you have to do the legwork. Get them to write more clearly in the IPP what the qualifications are. So I think sometimes that's hard to sort out in your own mind. Like, what do I even want the language to say, right? What is it that makes this provider good and this other one not good for my situation? If you can get to a list of qualifications that's objective, that a provider would be able to say, yes, I do or don't have that skill set, or I do or don't have that type of training. So that then if there is ever a time where they're not providing a provider who has the listed qualifications, you're set up to file a 4731 complaint, which again is still a hoop to jump through, but at least you're to a point where you have something clear to enforce. And I think getting out of the business of being the one who does all the legwork sooner rather than later, so that then if there comes a point where you're not around to do all the legwork, regional center is used to taking responsibility for things, is a good kind of gradual process to start now. So that, because realistically, when a regional center consumer, particularly with a significant intellectual disability, doesn't have family to do the legwork, regional center doesn't hand them a list of vendors and say, find your own group home, right? They do the legwork because they know they have to. So kind of easing into that arrangement, I'm not going to do your job for you, who's going to do this, can be good for setting the tone and getting them set up to know how to look for the right provider, right? Using the specific language you've gotten written into the IPP as a guide. But again, not easy. But I think starting with, making a list and making sure it lines up with what the assessments say and with what the providers who've worked with him are willing to say, yes, that's what he needs, so that they can't come back and say, you don't really need that, is really the key.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, Lisa, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, this is Lisa. I do have a young teen who's 16 going on 17, and she has a vision problem, and she meets all of the 5 categories of qualifying categories of regional center. And I have wrote letter to regional center that this child needs the vision therapy because she has a vision issues, so she is unable to read, and then she has depth perception issues. It's more safety and health issues. So regional centers sometimes get to habit of hang up on the generic services. So what they're saying, did you get denial from your insurance? But sometimes the vision therapy is not covered by insurance. They won't even request for vision therapy. It is not covered. So when I tell them, well, you didn't get a denial, I cannot get a denial because it's not covered. And so then I even wrote a letter to school. I got school to denial. So now they're asking, did you look for some other grants? Did you, look for other services? So sometimes this genetic services, you have to exhaust all the means of genetic services.
And they're making you do all the work, right?
Yes. And sometimes it's not feasible, plausible, even to obtain the denial. As a family member, it is like a daunting task. Mm-hmm. We don't even know how to step forward. You're like stuck in that one place, doesn't know where to go.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that?
Mm-hmm. So I think this is where it's helpful to put it back on the regional center to actually help you access generic resources. Because if they're asking you to do things that are ridiculous, they're not going to want to do that themselves, right? Invite them to participate in this process of jumping through all these hoops they're trying to have you jump through. Another option, if you're to the point where it's clearly a delay tactic and you're done playing nice, would be to just go ahead and file for hearing and say, I think I've proven that the generic resource is exhausted. Let's see what a judge says. And they may back down at that point. They may be willing to negotiate with you to settle the hearing. I think being able to show that you show something is helpful, right? So in the case of the insurance plan that doesn't cover the service, you may be able to just show them a copy of the insurance plan, right? Or a letter from the insurance company that says that it isn't a covered service. That may be a way to meet them halfway. But if it's seeming like this is just never going to end and they're just going to keep, they're just trying to run out the clock and, keep coming up with ridiculous hoops for you to jump through, you could go ahead and appeal, or you could go back and say, okay, I need you to help me access generic resources because I've tried and I haven't been able to. So if you think you can do it,
so
power to you, right?
So how can we have a grassroots movement to change mindset of regional center? The service coordinator, their job is not to become an investigator or the auditor. Their job is to simply help their consumer to live a better life and have a choice. So make their today better than yesterday. So how do we change that? Because to my experience and a lot of the family members' experience is that when they go into the IPP, anytime we have to deal with, dialogue with the regional center, it's just like, first thing they say, no, that's not possible. Well, let's think about this. How can we make this work? How can we make our client to live better? So how can we drive this movement to have them think different? They're not the auditor. They're not the investigator. They're not the gatekeeper. How do we change it to have some compassion, right? Empathy. How do we adopt that instead of have them wear a different hat? We have to have them switch to different hats. How do we do that?
Well, I don't know if you're in self-determination or if Can the ombudsman talk about things that isn't in self-determination, Nina? I don't.
Well, there's a self-determination ombudsperson.
Um,
And I definitely, if you are in self-determination and this is intersecting with that, definitely do that. But a very good point, Arlene, even if you're in traditional services in that system. So this year, for what it's worth, it's brand new. In this year's budget, DDS got money to create a new division. I forget their full name, of community resources. In any event, that new division, which also governs, they have just done, as a result of a lot of work of DRC and DVU, they're going to start reforming their fair hearing process. But in any event, DDS, as part of that whole effort, is hiring several new ombudspersons, which they're calling, we hear, Lanternman ombudspersons. So they are, now they may have limited, sort of scope of their duties, but I would recommend, Lisa, I love what you're asking about. And I would recommend, if they are supposed to be watching the system or trying to help the system work, I would go to these new positions. I would also talk to every regional center has a DDS person who never utters a word, but they go to board meetings and they go to your advisory, self-determination advisory committee meetings. But I would use them if they're there. I think all of us should, if there are issues, contact them, put them to their proofs. The DVU is looking at just how much huge amounts of money regional centers and DDS got for their bureaucracy. And it better damn well be going to turning service coordination into compassionate helpers to create a culture of actually helping rather than just saying no and, presenting roadblocks. So, talk to us, Lisa, attend DVU events but for sure, let's use every avenue that is out there and, report these issues.
I've been wanting to do self-determination for a long time, but my IPP is not right. So therefore, I cannot move forward with self-determination. I know we talk about self-determination, but IPP is first step going through self-determination. Because if your IPP is not correct, going through the self-determination is going to take a long time. It's going to cost you at the end. So my goal is to have sound IPP, because now regional center is going to person-centered IPP. I don't think they truly understand how to develop an IPP person-centered. So therefore, I don't have right IPP. I don't have right goals for the self-determination. So that's why it's dragging long time for me to go to this SDP process. But that is a roadblock, not having right IPP, because you do not receive IPP on time, or you don't even have a right draft of IPP, you cannot go into SDP process.
Which regional center are you with, Lisa?
Central Valley Regional Center.
Okay, so I don't know if you go to the self-determination Connect meetings that we have generally on Wednesdays. You can go to our website and you'll see the calendar of them there. But
yes, I'm in it. I go to DVU SDP. I go to local SDP. I'm in every meeting every time.
Okay.
And yes, I do want to go to SDP. My daughter needs it because she's 17. It's very important. I truly believe in SDP, and our kids want to work. They want to be part of the community. They want to be present in a community. But what we don't want our children to be have individual chain linked to go to the places, and people looking at us like they're looking at the zoo. That's not what I want to see. Yeah. So I'm like huge. I believe I believe it to the core. It's in me. I don't even know how to. I can just talk about it all day long, but I need to have right IPP, and so does many people, because they're not getting IPP on time. And then when we go to the IPP meeting, they're there but not there, if that makes sense.
Right, but, and I'll
Thank
just kind of end it with like, part of the SDP process is to get an IEP that works within SDP. So, okay, Vivian has something. Where are you, Vivian? Oh, Tim, you got something too?
Yeah.
Okay, Tim first and then Vivian. I gotta find Vivian to unmute her. Go for it, Tim.
Thank you, Megan, for coming today. We really appreciate you, and I'm sure that we will speak again more in depth. Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
Darlene, is it just me? But we are getting more and more people every month in our sessions. We are nowhere close to SDP Connect, but Communication Access Connect is coming close at being in second place.
I know. I noticed that
Next
today.
month, we are having another guest speaker. Lateef McLeod is an AAC user and a poet and a truly awesome person. You don't want to miss next month Communication Access Connect, and please spread the word and let's have over 100 audience for next month's session. Darlene, do you want to add to this plug?
Yes. Okay, so
Are you still there? You are super excited for our guest speaker for next month. Do you want to chime in after Darlene?
all right, William, if you got anything to add. Okay, so I know that Lateef is a poet and that's a wonderful thing, but what I am so excited about hearing from Lateef about is that he's working on his PhD in sociology and one of this related sociology. And to me, I think communication access and valuing communication is a cultural issue. I don't think it's just a regional center issue. I think it's a cultural issue. And so that's where I'm going to be plugging for Lateef. I mean, yes, I'd like to hear his poetry, but I'm really excited for us to have this conversation about society and communication differences and how, how to kind of build a different culture for ourselves, right? So whichever version of Lateef you want to come here, he's going to be next month, and that's going to be exciting. Let's see, I think there was one, we only have like 3 minutes, but I want to make sure that somebody in the Spanish speaking group had a question. Cecilia. Vivian, if you can put your stuff in the chat, that might be helpful, because Cecilia and Lourdes, you want to go for that? I don't, not Lourdes, whoever's translating right now. The question's at 5:25. Do you have translation? Oh. Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. From Cecilia Ortiz Barajas. Yeah. Well, again, that's the stalling experience that we're having. And so I'm guessing Megan's going to say to file that form which one is it? I'm losing all my numbers.
Well, so it depends on where you are getting delays, right? So if something is already in the IPP and not being implemented in a timely manner, you can file a 4731 complaint. If I know one of the questions you sent me ahead of time, Darlene, was, what can you do if an entity is using, we need more assessments as a delay tactic? If you think you have enough information to prove what you need, you can go ahead and file for hearing to kind of move things along, right? And sometimes they will back down. And sometimes you can go to hearing and prove that you have already gathered all the information you need to show what service you need.
Yeah. Okay.
Not
well,
a perfect fix for sure.
I know. And I'm gonna cut us off here, and please read the chats and participate again next month in September. Come to the August 31st event. As you can see, we have lots of communication opportunities to go around for all of us. We're really working on wanting to make sure that you guys have resources and that you feel empowered and that you are feeling connected to another group of like-minded people. I know that I always feel good when I'm connected to a like-minded. I want to thank you again, Megan, for doing this presentation and being in the hot seat. And I think we just have to stand up and we have to tell people we understand these things. We know what we're talking about. Here's what I'm going to do if you're not giving me a good idea, a good response. And I know what to do about that. Megan has put in the chat, and you can always look at DRC's website for information. There's handbooks and there's forms to fill out if you want to talk to people. The same thanks again, Megan. And the same goes for us here at Disability Voices United. So thank you to our interpreters for hanging in. And thank you guys for making this the biggest call we had so far. Tim gets happy. We all do. So we'll see you soon. See you next month.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks. Bye.